Eloise, who everyone calls Ellie, is a shy, dreamy teenager living in the quiet English countryside with her grandmother. Ellie's mother died years earlier after a long struggle with mental illness, and ever since, Ellie has occasionally seen her mom's ghostly reflection appear in mirrors. She isn't frightened by it. If anything, it comforts her, like her mom is still watching over her. Ellie has always loved fashion, sketching outfits and sewing her own clothes, and she dreams of studying design in London. When an acceptance letter finally arrives from a top fashion school, she's overjoyed. Her grandmother is proud of her too, but warns her gently that London isn't as innocent as it looks, and that there are dangerous men in the city. Ellie takes the train into London, and almost immediately, the real world feels colder than the dream she imagined. Her taxi driver makes creepy, unwanted comments toward her during the ride, so instead of confronting him, she quietly gets out early at a shop and waits for him to drive off before walking the rest of the way to her dorm alone. It's a small, uneasy moment, but it sets the tone for everything that follows. London isn't the glamorous fantasy she pictured. At her student dorm, Ellie meets her roommate, Jo Costa, a confident, sharp-tongued girl who instantly treats Ellie like an outsider. That night, Jo Costa and her friends take Ellie out to a bar, and in the middle of the conversation, it comes out that Ellie's mother didn't just die of illness, she took her own life. Later, hiding in the bathroom, Ellie overhears Jo Costa mocking her behind her back to the other girls. Hurt and humiliated, Ellie slips out of the bar alone. Walking home through the dark streets, she notices an odd older man staring at her with an unsettling smile. Back at the dorm, things get worse. Jo Costa brings a guy home to hook up with while Ellie tries to sleep just a few feet away. Overwhelmed, Ellie steps outside and finds herself surrounded by a loud, chaotic party, feeling more isolated than ever. The only person who's genuinely kind to her is a classmate named John, who quietly becomes her one real friend at school. The next morning, exhausted, Ellie oversleeps and has to sprint across campus, barely making it to class in time. Ellie decides dorm life just isn't for her, so she goes looking for a place of her own. She finds a small room to rent in a quiet old building run by a strict but polite landlady named Miss Collins. Miss Collins lays out firm house rules: no male visitors, curfews, respect for the property. But Ellie doesn't mind. For the first time since she arrived in London, she finally feels safe enough to fully relax. And that night she sleeps deeply, pulling the covers all the way over her head. That night, something strange happens. Ellie wakes up, but she isn't in her room anymore. She's standing inside a glamorous 1960s nightclub called the Café de Paris, and every time she catches her reflection, she sees a beautiful young woman named Sandie instead of herself. Ellie can't touch or interact with anything. She simply follows Sandie around like an invisible witness inside someone else's memory. Sandie dreams of becoming a professional singer, but the night starts badly when an aggressive male customer won't leave her alone. After brushing him off, she's introduced to a smooth, charming man named Jack, who tells her he can help launch her singing career. When the same rude customer insults Sandie again, Jack throws a punch in her defense, and the two of them run off together laughing, ducking into a phone booth for a kiss. Ellie feels that exact kiss too, because when she wakes up back in the present, it's like she actually lived through it herself. The dream doesn't just stay locked in Ellie's head. At fashion school, inspired by what she saw, she starts sketching and sewing a dress based directly on Sandie's glamorous 1960s look. Jo Costa even notices a hickey on Ellie's neck, mysteriously placed in the exact same spot where Jack kissed Sandie in the dream. Proof that whatever is happening to Ellie at night is leaving real marks behind. Ellie keeps slipping back into the past almost every night. She watches Jack take Sandie to a bigger, more exclusive venue called the Rialto, introducing her to the owner so she can audition. Sandie sings, and the men in the room are visibly impressed. For a moment, it looks like her dream of stardom might actually come true. Back in the present, Ellie becomes increasingly obsessed with Sandie's world, even dyeing her own hair blonde to match her. Her design teacher praises the dress she's working on, but Jo Costa keeps needling her out of pure jealousy. Curious, Ellie visits the real building that used to house that old nightclub, now completely transformed, then stops by a nearby pub to ask about work. Walking home that night, the same strange older man from before approaches her again. He insists he isn't hitting on her. He just recognizes her, somehow, because of her new blonde hair. Ellie's next trip into the past reveals things have gotten much darker. Sandie is no longer the rising star she was promised. She's just one of several women dancing in skimpy outfits as background performers around a lead act. Backstage, Jack starts pressuring her to entertain wealthy, powerful men if she ever wants to make it in the business. Horrified, Ellie watches as a lecherous stranger approaches Sandie in a private bedroom, clearly expecting sex. Unable to stay silent, Ellie screams at him to stay away from her, and for one unsettling second, it's as if he actually hears her voice. Then she jolts awake in the present, badly shaken, disgusted by what Jack has turned Sandie into. Ellie tears apart the very dress she designed in Sandie's honor, unable to look at it anymore. Ellie tries to keep up appearances at school and her part-time bar job, but she can't stop returning to Sandie's world every night, and Sandie's story keeps spiraling. Jack has now fully forced her into sex work, trapping her in an endless cycle of abusive clients under a string of fake names, while she sinks deeper into drugs and alcohol just to cope. Only one client, an older, well-mannered gentleman, ever treats her with any real decency. Watching Sandie fall apart and talk down about herself, Ellie desperately tries to reach through the mirror separating them, and in one terrifying moment, she actually smashes the glass and grabs Sandie's arm before jolting awake, gasping for air. Back in the present, John notices Ellie looking pale and withdrawn, so he invites her to a Halloween party to lift her spirits. There, surrounded by Jocasta's crowd, Ellie starts drinking and dancing to loosen up, but the past bleeds violently into reality. She starts hallucinating twisted, ghoulish versions of every man who abused Sandie, and even sees Sandie herself dancing alone, lost in the crowd. Worried about her, John walks her home. They start kissing, and things get intimate until Ellie glances upward and sees, reflected in the mirrored ceiling, Jack violently attacking Sandie. She starts screaming at him to get off, then watches in horror as Jack appears to stab Sandie to death right above her. Her landlady, Miss Collins, bursts in over all the noise and immediately orders a startled John to leave. A male visitor breaks her one strict house rule, then simply tells a trembling, terrified Ellie to go to bed. The next morning, guilt-ridden, Ellie apologizes to Miss Collins for the disturbance and asks her outright if anyone ever died in that bedroom. Miss Collins dodges the question completely, determined to find real answers. Ellie heads to the library and digs through old newspaper archives, searching for any record of a murder from the 1960s. While scanning through old articles, she starts hallucinating the same ghostly, distorted men again, closing in around her from every direction. In a blind panic, she nearly stabs Jocasta in the face with a pair of scissors before John yanks her back, just in time. Terrified of what she's becoming, Ellie flees the school entirely and runs straight to the police to report a murder. But all she has as evidence is a dream, and the officers can't take her seriously without anything concrete. Now fully convinced that the strange old man who keeps following her around town is actually Jack, decades older, having gotten away with murder for 60 years, Ellie corners him outside her workplace and tries to secretly record a confession on her phone. When she brings up Sandie by name, he only says something chilling in response, that Alex killed Sandie and that whatever happened to her, she brought entirely on herself. Before Ellie can press him further, he steps out into the street and is struck instantly by a passing car. As people rush to help him, Ellie's boss reveals something shocking. The man was actually a retired police officer, not a killer at all. In that single instant, everything Ellie believed collapses. This gentle, quiet old man wasn't Jack. He was the one client who was ever kind to Sandie all along. Shattered and completely confused, Ellie decides she's had enough of London and packs to go home to her grandmother. Before she leaves, Miss Collins offers her one last cup of tea and hands her the day's mail. Among the letters is one addressed to Miss Collins using her real first name, Alexandra, the exact fake name Sandie used as her alias with every client all those years ago. The horrifying truth finally clicks into place for Ellie. Miss Collins is Sandie. Miss Collins calmly explains everything. Years ago, when Jack tried to murder her, she managed to fight back, wrestle the knife away, and kill him instead. Broken beyond repair by everything she'd endured, she buried her old identity forever and quietly became Miss Collins. But her story didn't end there. Over the following decades, she hunted down and murdered every single man who had ever abused her, becoming, in her own twisted way, just as dangerous as the men who once hurt her. Then comes the gut punch. Miss Collins reveals she's already poisoned Ellie's tea, planning to stage her death as a suicide to protect her secret forever. Just then, John arrives looking for Ellie, with her strength quickly fading from the poison. Ellie manages to scream at him to run, but Miss Collins stabs him too before he can escape. As Ellie stumbles upstairs to get away, a fire suddenly breaks out downstairs and starts tearing through the old house. Trapped in her bedroom, Ellie is surrounded by the vengeful spirits of every man Sandie ever killed, clawing their way through the walls and floor, begging Ellie to finish Miss Collins off once and for all. When Miss Collins finally breaks into the room after her, Ellie catches her own reflection morph into young Sandie's face, and for a brief moment, Miss Collins seems to finally see the monster she has become. She raises a blade to end her own life, but Ellie stops her, choosing compassion over revenge. Even after everything, Miss Collins makes her own choice instead. She decides to stay behind and die in the burning house, while Ellie drags John's badly wounded body out to safety. Just as paramedics arrive outside, the flames consume the entire building, and Miss Collins along with it. Months later, the story ends on a hopeful note. Ellie proudly debuts her finished fashion collection at her school's runway show, with her grandmother and a recovered John cheering her on from the crowd. Her teacher and classmates congratulate her warmly on her work, all except Jocasta, still just as petty and bitter as ever. As Ellie takes in a moment, she catches her late mother's gentle reflection, smiling back at her one more time, just like always. Then, as her grandmother and John walk over to hug her, she notices one final reflection in the mirror. Sandie, finally at peace after everything, giving her a small, grateful wave goodbye. And that's the full, tragic story of Last Night in Soho, a dazzling dream of the glamorous past that slowly turns into a devastating warning about the real cost of chasing fame in a world built to exploit young women. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more movie breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next one.